I've got a story time for you. Here's how I saved my life by running away from home in the dead of night to hitchhike to the psych ward. Trigger warning on this video, there will be talk of murder and details of that murder. So if you're not up to hearing about that, please leave the video. Now, as I said, this is the story of how I saved my life, but I don't just mean how I saved my life from a psychiatric emergency. I mean how I saved my life from the most abusive, dangerous situation I had ever been in. To start, let's dispel a fairly common myth, which is that people with psychosis are violent. The truth is that people with psychosis are actually at far greater risk of receiving violence than inflicting violence. In fact, it's statistically proven that between the two communities of people with psychosis and people who are mentally well, who don't have mental illness, they are just as likely to commit violent acts as each other. So when you hear about mass shooters or you hear about serial killers, the odds that they have psychosis are very, very unlikely. In fact, the people who have psychosis, who do commit violent acts, tend to commit them amongst like people they're close to. It's not some random killing spree. It's really not as common as it's made out to be. It's way more common that they're the victims. My story is abundant proof that people with psychosis are more often the victim than the perpetrator. I am the victim of what I consider to be a violent act because I feel that any domestic violent relationship is a violent situation. If you're in an abusive marriage that involves domestic violence, that is, a place to be a victim. Like, I am the victim of an abusive marriage that happened as a consequence of my psychotic episode. Now, the thing about psychosis is that you don't exactly know what the fuck is going on at any given time. You never have any clue what is actually happening. Your reality is so far from what everyone else is going through that you may believe something is real that no one else can see, no one else believes, no one else has any proof of, and yet you will not see anything any other way. Like, people could tell you, no, that's not real, that's not really happening, and it will make no difference. You are so fixed on this false reality that anything happening outside of it is completely lost to you, right? Actual reality happening all around you means fucking nothing. Nothing. In my psychotic episodes, I am mentally incapacitated, meaning that I cannot make decisions on my behalf with reasonable discretion. I cannot make any decision at all, even if it's just going to the store to pick up a drink, because my psychotic head will look for messages in every drink. So I can't even get Gatorade without thinking that I'll be attacked by an alligator the second I leave the store. I cannot make any decisions with reasonable discretion. When this applies to legal matters, I sure as hell cannot consent to anything. Absolutely not within any frame of mind to consent legally to anything, especially marriage. So what did I do in a psychotic episode? I legally consented to marriage. I consented to a legally binding marriage to a man that I barely knew. Now, a little backstory about this guy, we'll call him Rob, and I met Rob in a crisis center. It was not a hospitalization, it was like a step down from that. It was a lockdown facility that was basically meant to stabilize people with psychiatric emergencies. So we were not meeting in the most romantic environment, not exactly where I thought I would pick up a husband. But nonetheless, I had a solid 10 days with this man, and we talked all about our lives, all about our interests, because there's really nothing else to do but sit around, watch TV, and yap, yap, yap. So I told him, right, that I had schizoaffective disorder, that I am prone to psychosis, and I've had several psychotic episodes that have landed me in the hospital. And he told me something in that stay that stuck with me for years, which was that I didn't need to ever go to the hospital again. And what I took that to mean was that someday I would be well enough and mentally stable enough that I would no longer need the hospital. What he actually meant is that I should never go back to the hospital under any circumstances ever. Now, after leaving that crisis center stay, I went years without seeing this man, didn't really think about him. I had briefly known him like ages ago when I went into a psychotic episode and randomly met him again. I had been psychotic about a month, and it was a very quick onset. I went from having just the slightest insight to completely gone within maybe 2 weeks. So I didn't even have time to catch it. Like, as soon as I recognized I was going psychotic, it was way too late. So when I stumbled into his life again, I felt that this was some sort of a miracle from God. Like, this was some sort of a profound happening. Like, I was meant to be put in his life. I was meant to run into him at Walmart buying socks one day. So this was a bigger meaning than it actually was. There's no hidden meaning behind buying socks at Walmart. However, I latched on to this man thinking that there was some significance behind him, that I was meant to be put in his life. And unfortunately at the time, I did not have anyone in my corner. I didn't have anyone who knew about my condition. So the only people in my life were just confused. They didn't know why I was like quirky all of a sudden. They didn't understand what had changed. And none of them could help me. The people who did know that I have schizoaffective and were aware of my condition were really far away. They live in Chicago. My family all lives across the country, whereas I'm near Seattle, and I had no one to protect me. Without anyone in your life who's aware of your condition and can look out for you, it is so easy to fall prey to other people's harm. People with psychosis are incredibly vulnerable. They have nothing to protect them when they go into that state and are left to the devices of literally anyone around them. So if there's an abusive, predatory person who happens to be in the vicinity of that person, they can swoop in like that and they can abduct a person, they can trick a person, gaslight a person, manipulate a person, and it's easy. It's so fucking easy to mess around with someone in psychosis, unfortunately, hence why they're more often the victims. As you can probably tell by now, that was me. Hi, I'm the victim. And this man, well, he took full advantage. He sunk his teeth in right at the start. We were involved pretty quickly, and I think we were together for a week, romantically, when he proposed. He proposed marriage to me, and in a psychotic state, I had no idea what was going on, okay? Now, it's one thing to be asked, will you marry me, by someone you've been with for years. It's another thing to be asked that by a person that you've been in physical touch with for a week. And most people would say no. But at the time, I had psychotic reasonings, such as the devil is after me. He has sent demons to tear away my soul. These demons are going to come for me immediately unless I have some sort of a divine intervention. This man was sent to me by God to save me from the demons. Therefore, I am assigned by God to marry a stranger to save my soul. So that's why I said yes. Clearly not the best move, and clearly not thinking straight enough to realize what I was getting into. Hence, mentally incapacitated, hence not having reasonable discretion to make my own legal decisions. So we had been together for 1 week when we got engaged. we were together another week when we got married. And in that week, I had the slightest amount of clarity to recognize that there was going to be a wedding. And as any woman would, I had ideas of what I wanted out of a wedding. I had an idea of what the dress would be. I had an idea of the cake. You know, a lot of people grow up thinking about their weddings and what they'll be like. A lot of women have an image in their mind when they get engaged of what they're looking for, and I got none of that. He made every decision, or at least most of them. He would not let me have any say in the wedding. For instance, I wanted to go get a nice dress, and he would not allow me to get a real dress. So I got a dress from the thrift store, and it wasn't even a wedding dress. It was just a white dress on a clothing rack. Now, this is not to knock people who have frugal weddings. I have absolutely nothing wrong with that, but I just want to illustrate how much control this man had over me, that he would not allow me to spend more than $10 on a wedding dress. He would not allow me to spend more than $10 on our wedding rings. So we spent about, I want to say $35-ish total on the dress and the rings. Then there was the money for the marriage license or certificate or whatever for the officiant, and that was it. That's all we spent money on. Aside from that, I had no say in the location. I had no say in who would be there. In fact, no one was there because he forced me to keep our marriage a secret. He would not let me invite anyone. So no family, no friends. We didn't actually have anyone in attendance at our wedding. So we had forged signatures onto the marriage license because there were no witnesses at all. As you can see, I was going into a really bad situation, and it only got worse from there. It turns out that it was very convenient for my new husband to have a psychotic wife. Why? Because people with psychosis are malleable. Their psyche is easily molded to believe whatever the person in their life wants them to think. So I was very easily gaslit into believing all sorts of crazy stuff. And I was easy to control. I was easily brainwashed, essentially, and I would do whatever he told me to do. And if I didn't, he would frame my reality around believing that I had to do what he wanted me to do, or else like my soul would be at stake, for instance. One thing he did not want me to do was go to the hospital. And he had promised himself that he would never under any circumstances allow me to go to the hospital. I do remember with clarity that he said that he said he would never ever do that. He said, I promised myself I would never let you go to the hospital. So that was off the table. And aside from that, he wanted me to be psychotic. He knew I was psychotic. He claimed in the future after that, he claimed that he didn't know, but he knew I had schizoaffective disorder, and he had known that technically for years. So I really was caged in by this man, and I had no escape. I had no way of leaving the relationship or coming out of psychosis or getting healthy or saving myself to any degree. Now, the thing about psychosis is that if you happen to be depressed while you're psychotic, it will influence your experience, your hallucinations, your delusions, all of your beliefs, all of your reality will be influenced by the depression. This means that the hallucinations will become very dark in nature. The delusions will become horrific, and it is literally the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced. No comparison, literally no comparison. If I added up every horrible thing that has happened in my life, and mind you, I have CPTSD, it would not even compare to one delusion. So my worst delusion, for instance, I have PTSD from so bad that I dream about it constantly. I have, intrusive thoughts of it every day. And one of the worst was ultimately that I had killed my husband. We were living out in the country in the guest house of his boss, and I had no concept of time at a certain point, so I didn't know what time of day it was at any given moment. So it must have been around 3 or 4 a.m. when this happened. He was asleep in bed, and he was a closet drinker. He was an alcoholic, but I thought he was sober. And one night when I was wide awake in the wee hours of the morning, I came into the bedroom and I saw him lying in bed, and there was just something off about it. I went up to him and smelled the alcohol on his breath, and my mind told me that it was formaldehyde and that he was dead. And when I looked again, in my mind, it looked as if his body had been chopped into pieces, and that this dismembered man was lying all over the bed. And I suddenly believed that I had killed him, that I had taken an axe and hacked my husband into pieces. Naturally, I was horrified. I mean, who wouldn't be? Even if it had been like a thing I'd done intentionally, which I would never ever do, I feel like anyone in that instance would be horrified by what they'd done. So whether it was real or not, I had the thoughts and the feelings associated with what it must be like to be a murderer. And for a day of my life, I felt all of the feelings associated with that experience. So I was horrified, I was frantic, I didn't know what to do. Like, what the hell? Do I run? Do I leave? What do I do? So that's exactly what I did. I couldn't think in the moment of anything better to do. So I threw on a jacket because it was winter, and I bolted. I ran through the fields outside of our house, and I have no idea how much time passed, but I stumbled and ran and fumbled all the way through these fields for what felt like an eternity, until I came across a driveway. And it was very dark out, but I believe it must have been like early enough morning that people were starting to wake up, because there was a truck in the driveway and a man standing outside of the truck. And I came upon this driveway, and this man looked at me and said, "You shouldn't be here. These people are mean. They're going to be very upset with you." And I must have looked just so lost and scared, because he took pity on me. He let me borrow his phone. I called my dad. I don't know why. I don't know what I told my dad, but this man, God bless him, he helped me a great deal. He saved my life. He allowed me to ride with him into town. And so I essentially hitched a ride with this random stranger, totally full-blown psychotic, and not even able to hold a conversation. So I have no idea what this man must have been thinking the entire time, but God bless him. He took me to a 7-Eleven and he bought me a muffin, and then he parted ways with me. And from there, I just wandered. I kept wandering around town until the sun came up and it was daylight and people appeared, and I am paranoid. I kept thinking, I'm a monster, I'm a murderer, I killed my husband, I'm a killer, I killed someone in cold blood. And I couldn't pass a single person without thinking, do they know? Can they tell? Do I look like a murderer? Will people be able to spot me? Are people looking for me? Are they after me? I was so paranoid, scared. I was frantic, I was desperate, and I could not think straight for the life of me. I could not think of the best thing to do. I didn't know what to do. I was so sure I'd be caught. And that's when I happened upon a police car. I came up to the police car, and thank God there was an officer. And I went up to her and I said, "You need to take me away. I need to go to jail." She put me in the back of her car to calm me down, try to talk to me. And she was like, "What's going on?" And I said, "I killed my husband. I killed my husband. I killed him with an axe." And she thankfully didn't take me to jail. She took me instead to the mental hospital. I have very spotty memory of the rest of that day. I think partly because of the relief of being detained in some fashion, and the relief that the responsibility of what to do about my situation was like off of my shoulders. It was up to someone else to determine my fate at this point. So there's not a lot I remember, but I do remember that they had put me in like a holding room while they did my intake into the psych ward. And while I was in that room lying on the little mat on the ground, I just heard screaming. I just heard the worst screaming. It was the most terrifying sound I still have ever heard. And it sounded just like my husband. And it sounded like he was yelling at them to like release me back to him, to let me go. And I just wanted nothing more than to get away from him. Now at this point, I didn't know I was in an abusive relationship, and I didn't know I had reason to be scared of him, but my instincts told me nonetheless that I should be afraid. Ultimately, I did get let onto the psych ward, and I stayed in that hospital for I have no idea how long. Long enough though that they got me on medication and it started to take effect. And over the course of the next few months, I slowly came out of psychosis. So when I was released from the psych ward, I had taken the first step in freedom, in getting my life back, because I would not be able to leave that man until I got out of psychosis. And as I said, he was not going to let me out of psychosis. Over those months, the slow recovery was a horror of its own. To start to get pockets of reality back where I wasn't having symptoms, and to piece together what the past few months had been like and what had happened, and realize I am married. I am legally married to someone I don't know. I am legally bound to another person. I don't have money. He took my income. Like, I am not even allowed to buy a burger without getting yelled at because he wouldn't even loan me $5. I have nothing. I have nowhere to go. I have no one in my life because I'm not allowed to speak to my family anymore. My family don't even know I'm with this man. They haven't heard from me in months because of him. What the fuck am I going to do? Ultimately, I just had to grow the balls and leave him. And that is kind of a long story of its own, but essentially my dad is a lawyer. And when I finally was allowed to speak to my family again, and they found out who I was with and what had happened, they were A, horrified and scared for me, and B, very kindly nudging me towards leaving him. And really the only way I could do that was through an annulment. My dad, the lawyer, had told me that there's this thing called an annulment, and there are certain criteria for getting an annulment, and being mentally incapacitated is one of them. And you, my dear, were mentally incapacitated, so you legally qualify for this, and you should probably think about it. So I did. I ultimately recovered enough that I could stand on my own 2 feet and defend myself, which was scary, but I was pissed as hell. So I really wanted to speak up for myself. And I put my foot down and I said, no, none of this. I don't want your bullshit anymore. We're getting an annulment. And it was terrifying. It was the scariest thing I've ever done, leaving him. But holy shit, it saved my life. Abusive marriages are terrifying. Psychosis is terrifying. And when you put the two of them together, it is one of the most traumatic experiences I have ever been. No, I take that back. It is the most traumatic experience I have ever been through. And I cannot even say his name, honestly. That's why I call him Rob in this video. But it was so damaging, so psychologically fucked up. And I've been out of that marriage for 6 years, 5.5. I can't tell you how much it still affects me. It is so bad. On the plus side, I have been psychosis free for 3 years. And it's something I'm very serious about today, and I don't take my mental health lightly anymore. I haven't gone off of my meds in a really long time. I used to be very bad about that, which is how I wound up in that situation in the first place. And today, I work really hard to keep safe and to avoid any instances that could lead to situations like that ever again. Like, I realize now how it's far too easy to fall into the hands of bad people when you're not taking care of yourself. So I take very, very good care of myself. I know that was a bit of a darker video, but honestly, I have just spent the last month working on my personality disorder series, and there was so much education involved and so much studying and memorizing that I really just wanted to break it up with a more lighthearted video, and it turns out it wasn't all that lighthearted. Oops. Nonetheless, that's my video for today. Thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate it. I am back to my regular content, and so I will be putting up videos every Monday and Thursday. You can look forward to those. There will be another one coming soon. If you have anything you'd like to add to this conversation, if you have any experiences of your own or any insight to offer, I'd love to hear it in the comments. And as always, please like and subscribe if you'd like to support my channel. It means a lot to me. I really do appreciate it. And I'll catch you all in the next one. Thanks. Bye.